Fractions to decimals using number chips. This is a digital lesson, and this one is New Year's themed. So the lesson starts with asking students to move these number chips into the correct place to show what number we multiply times each of these numbers in order to get 100. And this will walk them into the next step, which is changing fractions into equivalent fractions with 100 in the denominator. So this slide is pretty easy. It gives them a little practice moving the number chips. So all they have to do to move these is to click and hold on the edge, and then they can move it into place. And every slide has every number the students need. So as they get farther through the lesson and they use all of the numbers, but the numbers aren't working, they know they've made an error somewhere and they need to go back and check. So the next slide is just changing these fractions to equivalent fractions with 100 in the denominator. So here they know they have to multiply by 2 in the denominator, which means they have to also multiply by 2 in the numerator. And that gives them an equivalent fraction of 1800ths. So they're doing the same thing with 3 more fractions, just moving all of these number chips into place. So they should use every single number. And again, if the numbers aren't working, they've made an error somewhere. The next slide is a review of place value. They also need to know the place value of each of these numbers. So they're going to just read the directions. Here it says place your 4 in the ones place. So again, they click and hold on the edge. Your 8 in the hundreds place. 3 in the hundredths place, and so on. The next slide shows a different way to change a fraction to a decimal. This is one method. Now, if they have a fraction with 100 in the denominator, then they just look at the numerator. The number in the ones place will go in the hundredths place of their decimal. So here the 9 is going to go into the hundredths place. And then we just place the other numbers in order. So this number has to be a 0. 13 hundredths, the 3 again has to go in the hundredths place. And then we place the 1 next to it. And again, this number has to be a 0. Now this one, 180 hundredths, that 0 has to go in the hundredths place. And then if we place the other numbers in order, we get 1 and 8/10. So the next slide, students are just going to be changing these fractions with 100 in the denominator to decimals. So here we know the 5 has to go in the hundredths place. Then we place the other 5 and a 0. Same with 82 hundredths. They're going to do the same thing on the next slide. Here we have 5 hundredths. So that 5 has to go in the hundredths place. And that means these two numbers have to be zeros. Then we have 3-digit numbers in the numerator. And again, just that number in the ones place has to go into the hundredths place of their decimal. And so on. Now these fractions, we have to first change them to equivalent fractions with 100 in the denominator. So here, we know that we have to multiply by 50 in the denominator. So if we multiply by 50 in the numerator, we get 50 hundredths, which they can go ahead and change to a decimal. Here, if we change the denominator to 100, we're multiplying by 25. So 3 times 25 would be 75. And then 75 hundredths as a decimal. They're going to do the same thing on the next 2 slides, just changing their denominator to 100 first. When they get to slide 12, now they have a denominator that they can't change to 100. So they're going to have to simplify first. So 6/40ths, if we divide the numerator and denominator by 2, we get 3/20ths. Now we can change it to 100 by multiplying by 5. So we get 1500ths, which we can change to a decimal. 3/15ths, we're going to simplify that to 1/5, and then change it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator, then change it to a decimal. And when they get to slide 13, they have an example of a fraction that they can't just change it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. If they simplify, they're going to get 1/8. And they can't multiply 8 times any number to get 100, so they're going to have to use long division. And here again, they have all the numbers they need, and they're going to change this to a decimal by using long division. Same thing on the next slide. And then the final slide is going to be a repeating decimal. So these are all going to be 6s. And then once they finish their division, they're going to move this line so it's above their 6 so they can show that it's repeating. The last slide gives them some vocabulary: terminating decimal, non-terminating decimal, and repeating decimal. So that is the digital lesson, Fractions to Decimals, the New Year's version.